there.
Almost there, Charles. Almost there.
Just tired. I went upstairs, so that's a really long panel, that last one. And I know Jeff's fine, so I'm like, I'm going to go eat. I went upstairs, I sit down eating, and I have the stream up, of course. I'm monitoring, right? And I'm watching because I don't know the chatters. I'm watching people say weird stuff. And they said weird stuff, but Nightbot caught it.
Did say weird stuff.
Like, what are y'all? Why is there so many asterisks going through my damn chat? Okay. But at least it's getting caught by Nightbot, whatever.
People were real obsessed with poop.
Oh.
Jeff brings the weirdest people to the table. I'm just going to say that. He does.
Talk about that more later.
But yeah. Anyway, I sit there, my daughter's like, somebody needs headphones. Yeah. And I was like, look, you're not wrong. I'm not in a goddamn mood. I've been listening to shit for 24 hours, 2 days straight. So I'm just let me monitor.
Mics are on. Mics are hot.
Oh, crap. Hey, mics are hot. So I've been listening to Bleep for 2.5 days. So, well, Jeff, love you, man. But you bring some weird people to the chat. So, all right. Well, there's that. So, hey, let's kick you guys off. I'm going to mute myself, and you guys can go live.
Okay. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to the Schools Out Forever panel, How to Educate and Entertain Online. Yay! And I say, nothing says geeky, nerdy DragonCon fun like a panel about school. So that's what we're going to do this Sunday night. But seriously, I couldn't be more excited to have this opportunity to have the panel even be considered, let alone make it onto the digital media track. So big thank you to Charles. Thank you for letting me do this. And thank you to the two wonderful humans who are here with me. I'm so excited to have you both here. So jumping into introductions, I'll have you talk about how the internet knows you, but then also specific to this panel, what do you teach? So starting with you, Rob, how does the internet know you?
Hello, so I'm Rob Roberts, and I have a long-running video game show for 18 years, if you can believe it or not, weekly, called Orange Lounge Radio, which is a part of the Voice of Geeks Network, twitch.tv/VOG Network or VOGnetwork.com, and it's live on Sunday nights, although I'm kind of doing this tonight, so not tonight, but next week, and you can catch that, and so I've been doing that and a variety of other podcasts on and off throughout the years. When it comes to education, so I don't usually mix my day job and my night jobs. This is a little new for me, but for about the past 20 years, 19 years, I have been working in corporate education. So meaning I worked for some various companies, and I have been a trainer for call centers, claims processing areas, HR teams, and so on and so on. So I'm kind of bringing, I guess, a corporate education angle to this today. I work for a great company right now, although disclaimer, of course, I'm here to represent myself today and not my company, current or past.
Excellent. Great. And Steph?
Yeah, so I'm Stephanie Corniola. I am at Krogels on most of the internet. I do a Shakespeare podcast, which is called Protest Too Much and directly relates with my non-Dungeons and Dragons internet presence. But yeah, I teach high school English, and I have for the past decade or so taught high school and college, and then tutored from elementary up all the way through. So
yeah. That's awesome. No, and I like it. And when we were talking, I was even more excited because not only are we coming from different worlds of education, but also different parts of the country. And that just really excited me. So for me, I am Emily, also known as a swan named Emily across the internet. I mostly do art. So, Twitch streams doing art, but I also educate a little bit there. And my education side comes from teaching at an art center where I actually teach art and dance. So we all had kind of different things. So jumping right into it, let's talk about March and April when all of a sudden we're in the midst of what is a school year and everything stopped. So how did those first few months hit you guys? And what did that mean from that pivot point in mid-March?
Well, for me, I had been, ironically, I was on a cruise right before this whole thing hit. I know I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt today, but I was on the Star Trek cruise. Yes, there's an official, I was on that cruise, and we get back and I'm at work for about a week and then the whole COVID thing hits. And one of the things that I've been working on was that we were looking at an initiative to have more of our folks working at home and kind of that, because more and more types of companies throughout the US are looking at, were before all this looking at folks working from home. And it was kind of one of those things where, okay, we're going to, implement this later this year. It'll be a whole thing. We're going to have a very comprehensive training program, and we were putting the wheels in motion to do that whole thing. And then it was like, okay, so now that you're back from that cruise, and then, about a week, the governors just shut everything down. So we're just going to roll this out now. And as you can imagine, it was having to do a lot of work very quickly, and maybe not so ideal. I think we would have loved to have had, courses about how to manage your workload at home versus the office and things like that. We would have loved to have done that. Obviously, time is luxury, and we couldn't do that. But I have to say, all things considered, things went very well from a technical perspective, from and all that when it comes to that working from home transition. It went very, very well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we were right at spring break. So we have spring break in the middle of March, and right as everything started to get a little dicey, it was spring break, and we just never came back from spring break. So I think that it was helpful that we were already ready to transition to something that wasn't in the building. And then after that, we just kind of started catching up on how to make it work from home. So it was helpful in a sense because we were already at home, but also it would have been nice to have been to know that we weren't coming back, so we could make sure those devices got in the hands of the kids that needed them while we were still seeing them in person.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a really big thing at the studio where I teach. Is we just stopped. We closed the doors, and nobody was in, and all of our classes stopped. So I didn't have any way to get art supplies to my students, and specifically for the dance classes, all of those take place in person. We don't have an online presence. And that was a big issue, because now we're looking at trying to get so much of our programming into the digital world with no infrastructure, no setup, no plan for it. And that was incredibly daunting. And this is something that we talked about the other night, and I definitely want to cover more now, that it was a spotlight that was all of a sudden shown on anyone who had any sort of, we'll say, digital media knowledge. So I certainly don't have a lot, but I knew more than a lot of the other instructors. So I was tapped almost immediately to start teaching people just how to use Zoom. And that was the baseline. That's where we started, is how do we get teachers up and running on Zoom? Then let's go to figuring out, how do you teach tap dance through Zoom to all your students in their living rooms, and all of the trickiness of that. So did you guys get that same feel where all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, wait, you do this stuff, tell me more?
Yeah, I got a bit of it. Mostly as we were, building stories and building things, I would record audiobooks, not books, they're all short stories, but just audio recordings of the stories that we were giving, because a lot of our kids, we read out loud in most of our on-level classes. We know that the kids have gotten the story. We know that they've heard it. It's an accommodation that's helpful, not only for students with dyslexia or reading difficulties, but it's helpful for everyone to hear it out loud. So I just popped up my mic and did it in audition, and everyone was like, how did you do that? And I was like, this is the easiest thing I'm going to do all spring. This is not hard. So it was things like that really were in making videos, just to do class introductions, because we weren't doing anything live in spring at all. Everything was asynchronous through the spring. So,
okay.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me. So because I do a job in creating training that is kind of AV dependent anyway, we're creating, online courses. We're pretty familiar with, we used WebEx to record things before and all of that. A lot of this was not hard for me personally, but it definitely was a case where we were kind of called on to help other people understand this. And we also ended up incorporating Zoom. I think Zoom is just such a familiar tool right now to a lot of people that, we wanted to get on that too. And what's interesting is that it wasn't thanks to my digital media or my broadcasting that I'd used Zoom before, but I had used Zoom last year thanks to gaming. funny enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, I play a game that's very similar to Pokemon Go called Ingress, and they were doing a big event here in Sacramento where I live last year, and that involved a lot of people from around the West Coast coming to this town, and so we were doing a lot of our planning on Zoom. And so when we had to then roll out Zoom, I was like, oh, I know Zoom. And then, of course, it was like, okay, so could you help get some cards and some references built for that? But I mean, hey, I didn't mind doing it at all because I kind of find the tech stuff really fun. So that's the stuff I love to get in and talk about.
That's great. And I'm happy to hear that even at this point now in September, that it's not like I never want to be on a Zoom call ever again as we sit on a Zoom call. So it's good. It's good that it didn't, you know, crush the love of that or the interest in it. And I agree. I adore the people that I work with and the instructors that I have. And it was, my heart went out to them because so many of them are not tech people. They are incredible instructors, but they don't do a lot of tech. And especially when it comes to the dance side of things, there hasn't been as much of a need for it. It's so much an in-person, you know, physically correcting someone's movement or watching or demonstrating or even like with tap, hearing it, that we didn't have the need for it to be virtual. So, you know, I feel terrible because you have these instructors who are desperately trying to figure out ways to adapt their classes, and they're fighting against their own technology even. And that was something big that I've noticed, and I'm curious how that's going to move forward. Because I know some of the school districts in my area have Chromebooks and they've gotten the Chromebooks out to the kids, but it came down to the instructors too. Like we were trying to figure out people who didn't have microphones aside from the one built into their laptop. And now, so you're trying to play music on your Zoom chat and also instruct and speak at the same time and then make tap sounds. And how do you break up all of those things and not have it just be a mishmash? And the technology came down to it. So are you seeing, either with Steph, with your actual students, or Rob, your adults, who are having issues with tech and the tech side of it?
Absolutely. Just in the various, you know, Zoom calls that I get in on, you know, adults, kids, I don't think it really ends up mattering. Everybody needs to figure out how to mute themselves when they get on a call. And that's just something that comes with experience and comes with learning and so forth. And yeah, it's going to be interesting, though, to see how this goes long term. And I think a big part of that is, you know, how does this all kind of end? You know, because we don't know what the end of this looks like yet. Is it just one day, hooray, there's a cure or there's a vaccine for everybody and COVID's gone? Or is it we have to incorporate a little bit of the old with a little bit of the new, and now Zoom is part of our culture? I mean, they're calling this generation of kids going to school right now Zoomers. This could be a thing that defines a generation, and that in itself is fascinating.
Yeah, so for me, this has been something on my mind for a long time, because when I think, and I don't know how old, I won't guess anyone's age, but I think we're all in the same age bracket of, we learned typing. We learned how to use a computer in school because it was new technology and it was a class. Like we had a typing class. My dad had us take Mavis Beacon teach us typing when we were kids. And I'm an excellent, like.
Did you know she's not a real person? That blew my mind.
It's just a made up thing.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I need to go.
I'm sorry. It's like, I just did like Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. Guess what, y'all? Mavis Beacon ain't real.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was a Mario teaching typing girl, so that was my jam, but oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. I'll leave. I'll leave. Goodbye.
The spirit of Mavis Beacon.
Did you know that Mario's also not real?
Charles.
Well, yeah. So the spirit of Mavis Beacon taught me typing. But we don't teach, and I don't teach elementary, so I don't know if this is actually a fact, but I don't think computer skills are taught in school anymore. And they certainly weren't taught in the generation before us when computers weren't readily available in school. So we've got teachers who are older than me who have never been sat down and taught computer skills. And then we have kids right now who have never been sat down and taught computer skills, and their typing is all this. My students, my high school students, cannot type. They hunt and peck. So my expectation, that surprised me, because my expectation was that they'd be incredible typists because they're used to adapting to technology, but that's just not the case. So I think we are in kind of our age bracket is very lucky that we were taught these computer skills. And that is something that I think that we need to keep doing. And we're ignoring the fact that there are basic computer literacy things that generations above and below us are missing, because it's not their fault. They just weren't taught it. And it's so frustrating from every side, because it's not something that just is intuitive for everyone.
Stephanie, do you think many of them are learning to type like this?
Yeah.
And that might be the issue?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I think that, again, we learn to text on phones, so we're very good at this and very good at this. So we can sometimes forget that people weren't taught it. And unless they sat down and taught themselves, it's hard to pick that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fascinating because at least, and again, I work with a lot of middle school age students, and because of the era that they've grown up with, it was an assumption in my head before I started really talking to them. I was like, hey, you guys have always grown up with smartphones. Like, of course you would just know. But there's a weird, because especially with a lot of the technology, it is made so easy. They haven't been forced to try and figure some stuff out. And that's not their fault. I mean, phones are incredible now. And it's something as a kid, I could have never imagined where we would be. But on the old computers or on the old stuff, like, you had to really figure out ways to make things work. And so it was as soon as I was able to look at it and be like, oh, no, you don't know this thing. Here, let me help you. Here's what you should look for or what you should do. Or, hey, maybe try typing on the laptop a little bit when you're doing these things and not doing it on the phone, and just kind of incorporating those skills. But again, not stuff that I thought I was going to have to address. And that's been a very interesting shift.
Yeah. Yeah, I really think getting basics, and especially for teachers right now, it's so important to step back and not just assume that they're going to catch up, because a lot of them don't have the time or energy or ability to teach themselves basic computer skills. And I think it should be on districts to build programs that teach basic computer literacy, because it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the kid's fault. It's the districts who need to offer this training. And it may seem to someone like me, I would be like, well, I don't need to take a basic computer course, but that's me. That's not everyone else that's having difficulties right now. So districts need to train teachers on those computer skills, and it's going to open up so many doors, and it's going to make so many things, even when we're back in person, easier.
And I think it's exactly what you said. I'm not mad at the teachers. And I don't think anybody should be mad at teachers. Like, if you don't know, that's daunting. And if you're already looking at an unprecedented situation and how you're going to continue to teach and do your job successfully, to then stack on that another whole learning curve, that's insane. Like, that's I could see people being so intimidated by it that they just couldn't figure out. And it's something that I definitely want to bring up more, but it's the not knowing where to start. And that part of learning extends to everyone at every age. And I think this is a wonderful thing that we kind of talked about the other night, that I don't necessarily have to know everything about art or about dance or about all of this and how to teach. But if I know how to find the information, and Steph, you came up with a beautiful term for it. It was the keyword search. It's being able to know what you're looking for and how to look for information. And almost teaching people that right now is even more important.
Yeah, especially in an English class. Like, that's what I teach first, is how to narrow down what you need instead of typing a question into Google fully formed, like how to boil it down to a keyword and then search and research based around that, instead of just trying to find an exact answer to the exact question you have.
Yeah, and speaking from my prior experience in the corporate world, when I taught for a call center for many, many years, we had a 6-week class, and that might sound like a long time, but it's really not. When you're talking about, health insurance and the types of questions that people have when they call in, or doctors' offices have when they call in, there are so many different things that they could be asking about, and you can't possibly come up with every situation in just 6 weeks' time. That class was really about, where do you go to find the answer, and what are the key words that the person, on the call is saying to you, or what have you, that you need to arm yourself to go look up the information to assist. So I just wanted to kind of reinforce these things you guys are talking about with, the younger folks as they're, being molded into the adults they will be. These skills are very important later on in many, many different industries. I'm sure it's not just the ones I have been familiar with.
Yeah. And I think being able to, combat some of the fear about it, the fear of being ignorant or the fear of the intimidation of it and that part of it, that, you know, encouraging them that, and again, I have the benefit of working with younger kids who are like, wow, you know a lot. And I was like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. That's why I know things. I didn't just know these things, but, you know, really instilling in them and encouraging them that hopefully maybe then they go home and they talk to their parents about it and it ends up being a symbiotic thing. And the positive attitude side of me is always super excited because I'm like, no, I'm betting the parents are like, they're watching the kids and they're setting them up in a space, or even, you know, the parents are working in the office at one point and then handing it off to the kids. But I wonder, and I'm curious about you guys and what you think as far as how kids or even the adults are getting support at home. Are you seeing a lot of that in they have a good setup or they have good support, or are you getting kind of some students that just dropped off and you haven't heard from?
There's a mix. I've been really surprised positively at how many kids are showing up. I will say that. And there are always going to be students that, even in person, that we can't, you know, quite track down, whether it's literally or getting them to turn their work in. There's always going to be that in education. But I've had, you know, almost 100% attendance for the last 2 weeks. And I was so terrified that during those meetings, I was going to be staring at, you know, 2 kids. And because in the spring, or in summer school when we were allowed to do synchronous stuff, like we just didn't have any engagement at all. So I've been really surprised at the kids that are showing up, and they are, and I don't know if this kind of fits in this topic, but I feel like one of the most impressive things to me about virtual learning is I feel like I'm hearing from more kids than I do in person in the classroom, because there are so many. I teach freshmen, like I teach dual credit English as well, and they're great. They're always going to be on the ball. They're taking a college course in high school. They're doing good. But I also teach little baby freshmen, and they're terrified. And in class, trying to get them on the first day to talk about themselves or to, you know, share anything with the class or be confident in their answers to things is the hardest job I have as a freshman teacher. But online, they're so used to chat that they'll just type it in and they're going like crazy. You know, they're throwing out suggestions like in the Super Geeked Up chat. Like they love getting their ideas out there freely without having to speak them in front of their classmates. Nobody can see them. Nobody can hear them. It's just their chat. And it's been one of the most brilliant things about virtual learning for me, that I just hear from so many more of them than I think would be comfortable in person.
Yeah, you know, I think especially that point you brought up there about how they're using the chat as well as being there in person. I think I'm seeing a little bit of that in, you know, the world that I'm in as well, is that, you know, obviously when you are trying to teach a course, you know, to people, you want to kind of set expectations at the beginning of the course. You know, this is what we're going to learn about. And to help me, you know, teach this, I would like everybody to have their webcams on so I can, you know, see, you know, because believe me, as a instructor, those nonverbal cues are so important, you know, being able to see that stuff. So if people are asking for you to turn your webcam on, it's not because they want to spy on you or whatever, or make sure, you know, or like a micromanaging thing. Like it's just really trying to evaluate what points are landing and what points are being missed, right? So anyway, you set those expectations, but, you know, I think by offering those different types of ways to ask questions, you know, does anybody have any questions, and, you know, see if, you know, anybody on the call jumps in, or, you know, you can type things in and chat at any time and I'll get to it later, which is interesting because that's a skill I think we've all gotten from broadcasting as well, right? Being able to monitor a chat room or some type of feedback, Twitter feed, whatever it is, as well as the show that you're trying to do right now. So it's interesting how that's kind of played into it too.
I had a student ask me if I was a streamer in one of my classes. Just because of the way that I'm like focused on, you know, this PowerPoint that I'm showing and the story that I'm telling and everything that I'm doing, while also like taking things from chat and taking things that kids are saying and bringing them in. They were like, Miss, are you a streamer?
So you didn't
I ignored that part of the chat. But.
you didn't slip up or anything and go like, okay, class, I'd like you to turn to page 45. Oh, little Johnny Smith, thank you for the sub and the 200 bit donation. Appreciate that.
Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe.
Make sure it's okay with your parents before you throw me some bits, but I got some great stuff coming for you. Yeah.
Yes, I did not go there. But.
I love it. No, and it's funny when it came to streaming, I wasn't worried about the students. I had to talk to my adult friends. I was like, okay, so I'm totally cool if you show up in my stream. I'd love to have you there. Just be aware, and I'll put it in the description, like this is being offered to my students as well, for like what you said, for the shy students who maybe don't want to be on a Zoom chat with me. I'll tell them, I was like, hey, on Friday for 2 hours, I'm going to be sitting and drawing. If you've got questions, pop in. But then also the adults be like, just keep in mind that there might be students there. And while I know they've heard all of it, the last thing I want to hear from their parents is like, what were you watching? What were you teaching them? I was like, sorry, those are my friends. I love them. But in 10 years, you're going to find this really funny. But right now, not so much. That's a great segue into this. And I'm going to turn it to the actual focus on us and what it feels like to teach virtually and the difference between just streaming or just recording a podcast and the actual education side of it and doing it through the screen.
Well, I know like with teaching, because I do a lot of designing of courses now for other folks to teach, but I certainly have to think about, what would I be doing as a teacher? And I think one thing that's very different, although we talked about some of the similarities, right? Trying to manage the chat and those types of things that our broadcasting has brought us. I think one thing that's very different is trying to make sure to mix up the different modalities, even in a virtual environment. This is something that we try to do a lot in person. Maybe we're going to get up and go write on paper for this particular activity. We're going to work in a small group. I'm going to send these people over here and these people over here. We're going to play a little game show. Trying to mix all of that up in person is one thing, but then trying to do that virtually, that's kind of tough because, you don't trying to do a Zoom call like this for 8 hours, that's very hard. So you really have to mix that up with, are we going to do breakout rooms? Are we going to do, something aside in the chat? Are we going to do like a stop and do an audio phone call, or we're going to read or do an online module and then come back and talk about the online module? Like there's just so many other things to think about now. And honestly, that's still maybe not something my broadcasting has like completely prepped me for, but it is also interesting how doing something over here can kind of make me think, oh, I wonder if it would make my show more engaging to have these types of different things available or what have you, and vice versa. They do complement each other.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. There's no other real way to say it. I can stand up in front of a room and teach for 90 minutes, 4 blocks a day, with no real breaks. I had an extra class last year, so I was really teaching, 9 to 4:30 straight. And I was tired, but I do 50 minutes online and I can't do anything else. I'm totally shut down for those periods of like my conference times, because it's twice as exhausting, maybe a million times as exhausting. I don't have a good math for it. I'm an English teacher. But it's so much harder. Like Rob was saying, when you're not getting, there's room energy, right? And I know Charles was mentioning this about the con the other day. It's hard to sit and, he's been sitting and watching Zoom rooms all day, but without having the buzz of the room, it's so much more exhausting. And you're putting yourself out there and you're performing. And that's, my fitness tracker will always kind of think I'm exercising, especially when I'm talking about Shakespeare. It's like, keep up the great work. And I'm like, thank you. But it's like, you're performing when you're teaching, and to perform on stream with no room energy is a million times as hard. And I've done it. I've done a lot of like theater performance stuff in the past couple months as well. And it's the same thing. It's exhausting. It's tiring. And then for me, planning and grading takes a million times as long online. And I know that that's something that's been difficult for teachers too, is that prepping those materials. For me, I was always like, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'll just improvise it because that's who I am. and I know what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to read the room and make it work. But now I have to have everything laid out and in a PowerPoint deck for the day. And it's exhausting. I don't know. That's when I'm teaching, I love it. But it's the rest of the time that I'm just like, well, now I'm not going to move for 12 hours.
Yeah. No, and I think it's good. I think it's good for people to hear that because, I do love it. And I wouldn't teach if I didn't enjoy it. And it really, really like connecting with the students. But no, I'm exhausted and designing stuff. And because a lot of the classes I've been teaching virtually aren't mandatory. These were optional classes that were either set up before COVID hit and we closed down, or just things that we're trying to offer from there. So there was a group of youth center kids who had stuff scheduled and we're like, all right, we'll move it to Zoom. This should be fine. Like we sent kits home with them so they could have the supplies and I could talk. But during that hour, I was working so much harder to engage them and be fun and, not get down on myself too much because I'm not a video game. Like I love what I'm doing. I super enjoy it. I would happily draw for 3 hours, but if they're not super stoked about it, one, they'll be incredibly honest with you about that, but also you'll lose them. And there's one kid who I will adore forever just because it was wonderful. So on this chat, he's holding the phone down kind of near his lap and you could see him looking up and off. And I was like, the moderator who was in with me was like, hey bud, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm just watching Storage Wars. And I was like, okay, well, I'm so
Thank you
happy
for your honesty.
Yep. Okay, so not enjoying what we're drawing today, but it is. And I feel the need to be that much bigger, that much more performative to really engage them because I'm afraid they're going to get lost. And what I found out later, because this was still in the weird time, that some of the parents were using this as you're only allowed to go to Art Zoom if you've completed all your other work. And well, I think, having some sort of structure, I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to speak to any of that, but I didn't want it to be like, I appreciate that they treated it as a reward, but I felt like that did a disservice to it because it is still school. I was still expecting them to learn and be I was going to instruct, and it wasn't just a fun hour. So it made it that much more challenging. And I felt like, again, I had to work that much harder to it to keep them engaged and make them be like, yay, aren't you glad you earned this hour with me? Hooray, I've had so much coffee. They look like I'm crazy, which is fine. But now, what do you guys think as far as it coming to the home office and the home setup, either with parents or adults? Like how can parents help limit this is a great question from Selking in chat, is how do they help limit distractions for the kids in the house? And I think this works also with what you do, Rob, with having an adult who hasn't been working from home previous till now. Like, how do you really limit it and get a good space and get a good support system?
That's been a very unique challenge. I'm not sure I have the end all be all answer to how do you get those distractions to stop. I think it's kind of, you have to take the reverse approach. And I know that's one thing we've been doing, is that how do you just accommodate that those things are going to happen? So we know that our courses online are going to just take longer inherently than they would in the classroom, because when you're in the classroom, you're all there, you're in one place, you're going to focus. But when you're not in the classroom, you are in the virtual environment, it is too tempting to get distracted by these other things. And I say that to mean like whether it's something that could be prevented, like a phone type of conversation, or it's something like, your kid is having a meltdown and there's nothing that can be helped about that. I mean, these things happen, right? So we just have to, as professionals, understand, all right, these things are going to happen. We're just going to try to build in some more breaks. We're going to do a 10-minute break at the top of every hour, just so you can try to take care of those things best you can. If you do have to go away for a moment, just, shut off your webcam. And again, that way we know if your webcam's off, you're kind of dealing with an issue right now. And I can, as the facilitator, can kind of gauge, all right, what might I need to catch this person up on, or if they're gone a long time, maybe they need to come back later, or whatever it is. But I think it's more a question of what are you going to do to accommodate that those issues are going to happen. And in my opinion, a company that's going to do the right thing is going to take that approach.
Yeah, and I think the same for school as well. I teach dual credit classes, and I treat those high school students the same way I taught my actual college students when I was teaching at a university. And this is your time. If you want to sit on your phone through this whole block, Like, that's your choice.
Yeah.
This is me teaching you not just composition, but also how to take ownership of your own education. And if you're going to sit there and text, like, that's, if you can still get your work done, I'm not going to say that I was always super attentive. We had Wi-Fi in college.
Ooh.
Our campus was the first campus to have all Wi-Fi. Like,
Fancy.
I was definitely chatting with not, school stuff during classes. Like, it's the truth. Your teachers were all students before. They know what you're doing. But it's, if you can get your work done and if you can be present in your own way and you can take that information in, like, that's, you need to figure out how to make yourself work, how to make your own studies work. And I think that for my younger kids, Rob, like what you were saying, is we have to make sure the materials are available and accessible to them as much as possible. So whether that's recording classes so they can watch them back later when there are no distractions. We have students who have 6 or 7 siblings, right? They can't possibly have the bandwidth at home to all be in a synchronous class at the same time. So making everything clearly, the whole agenda, everything I'm saying in class is also on the PowerPoint that I'm sending out, is also in the recording of the class, is also in a million different places for, just knowing that they're going to miss things and being okay with them missing things. And I think that giving those students grace, if they've missed the first 10 minutes of class because they couldn't connect, that's not their fault.
Right.
That is, I don't know. I just think, I think everyone needs a lot of grace right now. And we need to make sure as teachers that all of our materials are as accessible as possible for them to learn on their own time. That was a long-winded answer, but
it's exactly right. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just saying something else that I was kind of thinking about while you were answering that. And I feel like I already know the answer to this question, but Stephanie, like, with our classes, one thing that's really helped the class be able to move ahead while, issues are happening is that we don't just have a facilitator, we have a moderator. So it's basically 2 people that are in every class, a producer, not a moderator, excuse me. So it's basically 2 people in charge of every class. The facilitator is obviously focused on the material and teaching and so forth, but the moderator is able to, so-and-so is having a tech issue, let me try to handle this on the side and those types of things. I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but do you have a type of moderator or somebody to help you with those types of things?
Rob, I told you I work at a public school.
See, but I
will say I have an inclusion teacher for my freshmen.
Okay.
And she has been able to, if a student is having tech troubles, she can bring them into a breakout room and lead them through. So yes, in a way, for 2 of my classes, I do have a moderator, which is so helpful. So helpful.
That's good.
Well, and I think this is great. And it kind of brings it back to something we talked about with the getting everyone in at the baseline education. If we're going to have teacher days where you just go into seminars and learn things and it's, about how to handle bullying or how the bus schedule is going to work this year, having the aspect then it is also, how are we going to handle the technology aspect of it and that type of onboarding and even being able to share what is working for other people. Like if someone was unfamiliar with Google Docs, like, hey, no, let's put one together between these, the 3 English teachers, and we'll work something on that, and that cooperation and that making sure that no one is feeling like an island because of that. And again, everybody benefits. The teachers now have a support system and the students are getting better served because of that. And there are parts of this that really excite me when it comes to the way that students learn and the fact that not everybody is an auditory learner. Like sitting in class and hearing someone lecture isn't the best way that everybody learns. I know it wasn't the best for me. I'm very much, I need to touch it. I need to pull it apart. I need to do it. I need to have that tactile figuring it out. And that's how I best learn. So a lot of classes, I took furious notes because I was not originally set up well through that. So now if I could go back, if I wanted to, if the material is available and I could listen to that lecture again and get it into my brain that much more, like I am very hopeful and excited for what that means in reaching students in other ways who learn differently, and that there are possibilities now where, again, you said having the PowerPoints or the PDF that they could read, or listening to you talk through it again, or just the interaction in chat. Like I'm very excited about that part moving forward.
Yeah, I am as well. I think that there are ways, and I've talked to my fiance works in tech, and there are, when they have meetings, people can type in questions and they'll like show up on a scrolling board or whatever, and you could upvote the questions and comments and whatever. There's a way to do that in person. Like they do that in person before the pandemic happened. And before this, I couldn't wrap my head around that concept. I was like, oh, kids in chat during a class. Like I can't imagine that would be a nightmare. But now all I'm thinking is when we're back, how can I incorporate something like that so that their questions or their comments are still being valued and heard scrolling on the board? And whether that means I just have to be a moderator while I'm teaching, which I'm already doing right now, and approve comments and approve questions so they show up. Like, I'm excited for that. I'm excited to learn how to do that and incorporate that back into the in-person classroom, because I think it's important that those students feel comfortable participating in that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's someone in chat. So Robert Dean said, weirdly, this experience will weed out the kids who will do better in college on their own. And I think I'm excited for, and I don't want students to be left behind, but I'm hopeful that this is almost, again, kind of reinvigorating that self-motivated, self-learning part of them where they can seek out information and they can find ways to be successful on that and have the support, along with that.
Yeah. And I want to say too, and I saw this conversation happening in chat as well, but the idea of being left behind and the idea of expectations, I'm lucky because I teach English, and we're always told like you have to figure out your essential standards or whatever. And I'm like, can read, can write. Yeah, that's it. And like English is such a progressive course that just builds on those two very, very, very basic skills, reading comprehension and writing comprehension. And like, then we get deeper from there. So I think we are in an English course. We're lucky that we can start, we can take kids wherever they're at and build on that. And we always have kids at different levels anyway. I think in the science and math courses, the expectation of knowing these equations or knowing this certain science thing makes it harder to judge levels, but also what in the grand scheme of things, if every 14-year-old doesn't know how to do a solve for X, maybe now that's just a 15-year-old skill. Like, these standards are not real. They're made up, if we can take kids where they are, that's the most important thing. Like, we need to know where they're at and how we can move them forward to find the information that they need to solve those future problems, exactly like you were saying before. So,
and then turn them into adults that Rob will work with who can problem solve on their own. And that's, again, is it great if you can get all of your students to ace all of their standardized tests? Awesome. Sure. But at the end of the day, I want self-sufficient adult humans, as much so. I say that as a mostly adult human who is mostly self-sufficient, but someone who can exist in the world on their own and figure things out. And that part of it, that's the part that matters to me. And I hope that people can kind of get in with, no, this changed everything, but it's okay. And we don't have to go back to the way it was. I really, really hope, like, personally, again, it's me personally, I think we would do ourselves a disservice if we did. And I hope that idea and that momentum keeps going, and that it's now forever, companies said, no, we can't have you work from home because you wouldn't get any productivity. And, Rob and I were talking about that the other night. Like, it actually, like, aside from the weird March, April, because we're just counting that as a wash, but the productivity is still there. And we found ways to make it work. So now this is an option. And we also use this going forward.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say, you're seeing some big companies, like Google, like Twitter, saying that, we are looking at possibly doing work from home basically forever after this, or making some and I think there's going to be a lot of companies that are looking at, well, maybe work from home is something we can do a little more of to help on real estate expenses. I mean, Twitter is right in the heart of San Francisco. That is not cheap real estate. So when they talk about something like that, it makes a lot of sense. Now, it's going to to be interesting to see the repercussions that has, on a city like San Francisco. But that's a conversation for a different group. But
Right.
but it is going to be fascinating to see kind of that ripple effect, because I don't know if things, as we look for that new normal, you guys are right. Things are not going to go back 100% to the way they were before. I mean, hopefully, yes, we have a DragonCon again in person.
Yes.
We have, the ability to see our friends and go to their houses and have birthday parties and all that stuff that we're used to. But what are the things that we have learned from this that generations are now going to be forever ingrained? The Zoomers I talked about earlier, right? What is that going to look like for the future? And I think it is going to be questions of what are these skills that we've learned in class? Like, I love that voting board you're talking about. And I'm kind of like, I wonder if we have something like that. I wonder if we should be looking into that, because I'm like, I'd love to have something like that. Honestly, I might have to talk to you offline.
Ask Mike about it.
But I mean, honestly, like, these types of tools. And, although at the companies I've worked with in the past, as well as the present, we were doing courses online previously, but have we been doing them to the best of our ability? Because now we've had to learn those new abilities because of this whole thing, and that's going to make those types of courses even stronger, and maybe look at some more hybrid offerings and things like that. So.
Yeah, for me, it's all, and I always go back to improv because that's where my roots are, but it's that yes, and yes, we will go back to school in person, and we will keep these things that we've been learning, and we will incorporate these tools. And the amount of accessibility that this opens up, sorry, you can't tell someone with a disability that they can't work from home. They can. We have proven that that's a possibility. And it is so important that we keep moving that idea forward and giving those opportunities where they're deserved. Like like just the fact that it was even an issue up till now that people were being told, no, you cannot do school online. You cannot learn from home. And we're proving everything wrong from those people saying no. And now we can move it forward. Yes. And we can open up accessibility options for so many more people to be able to do the things that they love and are productive for them and are educational and everything.
I love that. And that's yes. And I love that because that's such a positive way to look at this too, because I think so much of that focus on the new normal has been on the negatives. Like, oh, well, you're going to have to wear masks everywhere you go. And there'll probably never be a concert again. And, also all these things have been focused so much on the negative. But what about that positive side of it is that, when we do get to go back to class, what are those extra things that this whole experience has brought that we can bring to that? And, since we are all digital media people, what are the things from this experience that we can bring to our shows? And the yes, and for even my show that I've been doing for 18 years, there's things from this whole experience I can learn and incorporate with that.
That's the beautiful thing about education is you never stop learning. That is. And I love it. So I'm getting the high sign. So we have to kind of wrap up, which is, I mean, I could talk to you guys about this for hours and it's awesome. And I'm so excited. And it was something that came up quick on another panel where I was asked if I had a Twitch group of different teachers. And I was like, I don't yet, but I would love for this conversation to not end here, to have that online community and all of that, to keep going, to keep asking
I saw some other educators in chat. I think you should join in on that. Yeah.
So where can people find you if they would like to follow you and see what you're doing digital media wise? Let's do Rob first.
Sure. I don't do a lot about my day job online, but if you ask me about it in a DM or something, I'm happy to talk about it. But you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Rob Roberts. That's Mr. Rob Roberts. I have a personal channel here on Twitch at Rob Roberts. And of course, my show, if you like video games, Orange Lounge Radio, live Sunday nights, just not tonight because of DragonCon, but live Sunday nights at the Voice of Geeks Network, twitch.tv/VOG Network. More information at VOGnetwork.com. And thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, and you can find me at Kruggles on Twitter, and then I have a Shakespeare podcast at _too-much-pod on Twitter, as well as a D&D podcast, Adventure Incorporated, and that's at Adventure Inc. Pod on Twitter.
Awesome. And you can find me again across the internet at A Swan Named Emily. Like I said, I do kind of public broadcasting type happy little drawing on Twitch now and again. And I just want to say a humongous thank you to everyone in the DragonCon digital track. Like, if you've enjoyed this that we've put on, give them a like, send them a message. These guys have been rock stars all weekend, and let us put this information out there and connect with everyone. And I'm so excited, and I don't even know all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, but it's amazing. And definitely, guys, stick around. There's so much more programming even happening tonight. There's another 3-4 hours. There's so much more happening just tonight, but yeah, there's more. So enjoy that, and yeah, keep the conversation going. Yes, and
thank you, Emily.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charles.